I want you to think back. I want you to think back to when your business was a lot smaller, when you were back in startup mode and you didn't have everything, let's say, figured out. I don't know if any business has it all figured out, especially those who are owner managed or entrepreneurial driven. We're always learning. We're always tweaking. We're always making things better. We're always looking to grow. But let's think back to the startup phase. I want you to remember the first time that you implemented a project management software system, CRM, your manufacturing management software, your POS. Just think back to the first time that you took on one of these big technology changes that also affected people and process. Now, you don't know what you don't know, but in my experience, this is a super painful process for everybody. For everyone, it's a painful process because while you're looking at how your business operates and how it works, when you're looking at the different pieces and components, it is so hard to map out how this CRM, this POS, this management software, this project management software, whatever it is, you have to look at your business through a people and a process systematized approach to be able to break down all of the different components. And one, you probably don't know how it's going to work. You know how you work, but how should it work? And what should you change on the software and the process? And how should this software and process be built for your unique needs? And how should the software or process is kind of standardized and hopefully best practice in the industry? How should you change to accommodate those systems and processes? Do you understand what I'm talking about here? This messy time that we all face when we're like taking on a brand new system. Now let's take this one step further. Let's imagine that today your staff, your team, the news, everywhere you go, people are talking about AI. And they are talking about how you can find efficiencies and you can find productivity and you can get so much more out of your team and your staff. And maybe you can replace people. Maybe they're coming after our jobs. Maybe they're coming after your very industry and company. What are we going to do about it? These two situations are exactly the same. When you think back to your first big implementation of the CRM or the software, anything that's technology and people and process, if you don't know what you don't know, which none of us did when we started, it makes the first time we approach it pretty challenging. And if you just want to outsource this to someone else who doesn't know your business or doesn't know how you work, that is a recipe for disaster. So we as leaders need to know enough about the systems and the processes and the people to be dangerous, to be able to judge what's right and wrong and good and bad and what we should apply and shouldn't apply. But clearly we're not the experts at it. And this is the challenge that business leaders and business owners are facing right now. And this is what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Today's guest, Ryan Staley, is the founder and CEO of WhaleBoss. Ryan has been instrumental in guiding technology founders to scale their businesses from $1 million to $30 million in recurring revenue. He's been able to apply powerful sales frameworks to giants like Google, Amazon Web Services, Salesforce. His real zone of genius is being able to come in and help dramatically cut the sales learning curve for leaders and for organizations. He's worked with over 800 C-level executives and leaders to be able to get the rapid growth and the operational efficiency they're looking for. And today, we're going to actually have a different type of conversation. We're going to talk about how leaders and business owners are leveraging AI to transform their sales, their marketing, processes. But mainly, if we don't know as leaders how we're going to approach this, if we don't know what we don't know, how do we go about it? He breaks down in very simple terms, very clear steps, exactly how we as leaders should be addressing this AI juggernaut that is coming our way. So I want to welcome you to How to Sell More, the sales podcast for non-sales people, where each week we give a masterclass to help ambitious B2B leaders like you face the number one challenge every business owner has to focus on, and that is growing revenue. I'm Mark Drager. Let's get into it. So Ryan, you are known, of course, because you help CEOs and revenue leaders who are running these 7 or 8 figure businesses implement like dramatic change in the matter of just 3 months. And you do this based off of principles that you've picked up and learned in your own experience in working with massive companies. So this is what I want to break down with you today, because I think a lot of times, as I was mentioning to you offline, a lot of times people fall into silos where they hear the word SaaS and they go, well, I'm not in a SaaS industry, or managed services or consulting or B2C or tech or whatever it might be. And they go, well, that's not for me. And what I love about what I do, what I love about what you do is we can take lessons and principles from one vertical and apply it to another and make some of the greatest gains. And so I would love to hear, first of all, what challenges are revenue leaders and CEOs facing today? And how is it that in 3 months, you can see such dramatic change? Because I feel like that shouldn't be possible.
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple ways to look at this. And I think I'll put it in 2 buckets, right? First is depending on the stage of the journey that the company's at, right? There's predictable problems, just like there is weather with, temperatures and challenges to your car and your house and your landscaping based on the weather conditions. The same thing applies based on the revenue range that a company's at. So there's a unique journey from 0 to 1, then 1 to 3, 3 to 10, 10 to 30, 30 to 100, so on and so forth, right? And then you factor in layers like ownership structure, whether it's publicly traded, private, PE back, VC back. And regardless of what industry or vertical you're in, those are like the overlying factors that doesn't matter what space you're in, they're going to affect you one way or the other, right? And so I think that's one of the stages. So there's predictable problems based on that. Like, for example, one of my clients, I was talking to them today, they're roughly about 10 million in revenue and they're just doing amazing. They provide a automated marketing solution. And one of the things about them that I love is like they're having so much success, but now they're starting to run into problems where things are starting to break or they're not able to give enough attention to certain areas from a founder-led bootstrap, company to the next phase where there needs to be more handholding with bigger customers and segmentation. So sometimes it's just a easy switch like that. Like they're doing so well in one area that it's causing things to break in another. That's an example of what we see with that. And other examples are, and you've seen this, I'm sure, with conversion metrics, but just with sales pipeline metrics as a whole, if we're looking at higher deal value sizes, there could be one flaw in the conversion metrics. And if you just fix that, you don't even add more leads or anything like that, and it could double your revenue. So that's what I would say on one side. The other side that I see folks struggling with right now, and I've been doing a lot of focus on this because it hits near and dear to my heart, is the fact of how to integrate AI into their people. And last year, I think 23 was the year of integrating AI into product in companies, more on the data side. And now it's like, all right, how do we make sure we have a scalable process and strategy to integrate this into our people so we can create a superhuman workforce, if you will? And so that's kind of like the 2 big areas I see people struggling with right now.
So let's touch on the AI because I try to stay out of the conversation. One, I am so tired of it. I'm so tired of it already. But let's set that aside. Sorry, audience, I'm admitting that to you. I'm so tired of AI, but let's set that aside. The other reason I'm staying out of it is because, things are just changing weekly. Things are changing so quick. And I think you're going to maybe do some R&D with AI. You're going to test it. We use AI every single day. But for me to think about a brand new process or SOP and how we're going to roll the AI into it and how it's going to work and then how it could be predictable so we can then scale it out, by the time I go through those typical steps that I would kind of bake into an organization, things have changed. And then you go through it again and again. And things are changing so quickly, I almost don't know if we must nail it before we scale it. I almost don't know when it's baked enough to then send it out to the entire team. Is that a challenge that you find people are running into, or am I overthinking this?
Well, I think you might be overthinking it. And here's what I say. Like, I've been in your exact situation and thought the exact same thing. I was creating an MVP for a product. And the mistake I made was that this was last year in June. And I ran into that because I tested the product that I was creating. Results were good. Then the model changed and I didn't realize, oh, shoot, this, I didn't understand that. Now there's versioning control you could do to avoid that, right? Which I didn't know at the time. I was a noob in terms of that side of the house, but I've invested thousands of hours in using it day to day. And what I would say is that there's core principles that stay the same. So it doesn't need to be a long, convoluted process. And I'll give you an example of something that's really simple that you could do. based on SOPs, actually, for SOPs, an AI process for creating SOPs. So basically what you could do is you could record it in Loom. And within Loom, basically you copy the transcription, paste it in the LLM, use a prompt, and it'll create an SOP description of the entire video you just created, and then you have it done. Like, that's an example of, even if the models change, processes like that are still going to be the same, right? Okay. There's more complex.
So to me, like an AI assistant prompt like that, maybe I was overlooking that because I'm like, that is so obvious to me that you can leverage AI. We throw all kinds of questions at it. Typically, we will throw questions at AI that we don't know what questions to ask Google, or what questions to find, or how to research it, or even the terminology to use. We used to spend a lot of time on, say, for example, keyword research, where we'd have to jump through all these hoops to try and figure out what word would a target audience use through audience research and keyword research and hashtag research. And we do all this stuff. And then now we can just go to AI and very quickly, just continually use it as a sounding board to try things, test things, and figure things out. So maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Is not everyone? Aren't most people already doing that?
I mean, there's basics like that, but there's 10 levels deeper you could go on it, right? And I think maybe for you, the listener right now, who's looking at data on the marketing side, and say you're that or a leader, if you use a solution like ChatGPT for Teams, where there's the commercial data protection, or Microsoft Copilot, I think one of the things you could do is you could literally take a screenshot of data that you see from your outputs, have it analyze, find hidden trends and opportunities, and then create a plan all within a few minutes. So there's areas like that I think a lot of people are missing. They're using it just for really basic tactical things versus integrating in everything that they do, tracking that, and then innovating on top of it. And that's where there's a lot of opportunity.
Okay, that is super helpful. So let's take a step back. So you're sitting down with either someone in charge of revenue. So we're talking, CRO or CMO, a CEO. We're talking about people in business development, in marketing, and they're sitting across from you and they're saying, I want to be able to unlock this growth that people are promising, that if I go to your website that you're promising, I want to unlock this growth. Obviously, first step is well, what's the constraint? What's the problem? What are the potential solutions? What's the lowest hanging fruit? How do we resource it? How do we go about it? It's a very simple plan. But beyond those, set aside the table stakes of putting together any kind of strategy or plan. If you're looking forward to Q3 of this year and Q4 of this year, and with everything that's changing, what are you typically recommending?
That's a great question. What I'm finding is most leaders don't even know how to use it themselves, and they don't know what's possible. So if you have those, first principle gaps in understanding it, then you can't deploy it to a team successfully and in a coordinated manner. So it's funny, there's a company I'm working with, they're about 250 million in revenue. And same thing, the executives don't know how to use it. There's another company that I'm about to start working with, and they're a built from the ground up AI company, but they don't know how to use it in their day-to-day work. So what I would say is start with the leadership team, understand what's possible. And then I take it a little bit different approach to what you're talking about in terms of diagnosing where to focus. And it's really simple. And I heard Kip Bodnar, the CMO of HubSpot, talk about this, which is a great example, where he basically takes a 2x2 matrix and looks at, on the different axis, one is outcome related, what's the core KPI outcome that they want. And then the other on the x-axis is productivity, right? How much, on that scale, can we get it going up into the right, the top right quadrant, where basically we're freeing up time for a large amount of people in our organization while hitting that KPI. And that's usually the focus area. However, I'm sure this, with marketing and sales, there's core predictable problems that happen, like pipeline. Conversion metrics aren't where they need to be. It's just stack ranking them and prioritizing them and then doing that with it. You know what I mean? So that's what I would say. A COO I just talked to specific for marketing, one of the things he brought up, and this is how companies are starting to look at this. So if you're working for an organization, be aware of this, especially if they're PE backed, is they're looking at either how can I get 2 to 3x out of my employees, or how can I get the same work with less employees more profitably. So this is the strategy that ownership groups, investors are starting to take. So buyer beware. If you're working for a company like that, that's what they're talking about and maybe not telling you. So
yeah, it's so interesting, especially if we're talking about more of a medium-sized organization, because with my own agency back in 2016, 17, we went from being a specialized agency to more full service. And we moved from being, again, a specialized agency to more performance-based. And I didn't account for the complexity that I was introducing into my company when I decided to do that. And I talked to Rand Fishkin, the founder of Moz, about this actually, because he mentions that focus is a superpower. And I've been working really, really hard over the last few years in my business to help simplify things, simply because it's almost, it feels overwhelming and impossible to stay on top of everything.
Yeah.
And if we think about all the different tech stacks, if we think about the different communication channels, and the different advertising platforms, the nuances within each platform, the complexity, I am very, very confident and bullish that as things continue, we are moving more and more into a specialized world where you can continue to niche down further and further and further, because there are the channels there and there's the required expertise and the required specialization. And so a few weeks ago, I was thinking about high level. I was thinking about go high level, and I'm like, oh, I got to learn some of this stuff. And I attended a workshop on the changes in email automation and marketing. And I heard someone speak for 2 hours, and I thought I could spend the next 6 months of my life going all in on this. And I would probably know as much as this person does. But as soon as I took my eye off the ball, the industry would change. Everything would change. I would lose track of what's happening. And I share this story because I realized, I'm a big believer of who, not how, right? Find the who. Don't try to figure out the how. And it hit me just that morning. I was like, oh man, I am not going to spend a single second trying to learn into this. I need to find a who. And so as you're describing the changes that are happening within organizations and how AI is out there, and we have to start with leadership, I don't even know how an organization that may feel a few years out of date, might feel like things are constantly changing. How do you implement this without bringing someone into your organization who is going to be responsible for knowing it, figuring out, staying on top of it? I mean, are we seeing AI heads or leads come out of IT departments or consultants who are focusing specifically on AI to help implement this in businesses? Because I've not come across this yet.
Yeah. So there's the role of the chief AI officer, which is starting to become more prevalent. And so that's like a cross-functional role, and they have to understand tech enough to be dangerous, but at the same time, they have to be able to communicate and understand business issues. And so it's almost like a combination of a technical person with a business liaison person with a strategic thinker, which is hard to find. I mean, that's almost like the CEO of a business, right? Like to have that kind of thinking. And so I think you almost got to split that role into two and have one that's more orientated on like your company and your systems that
so like
are
a business analyst or something.
More orientated, more heavily tech on that side of the house with the product, right? And then I think you almost need a separate one specifically for people. And it's funny, I haven't really talked about this before, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about, because like if you're trying to integrate that into people, it's way different than integrating it into a product or a tech product. And so it's like, I think you got to split those roles if you're really being honest with yourself about like who you need in your organization. So that's kind of the way that I would look at it. And the second is what I'm really helping companies set up. And it's funny because like the range of expertise I'm seeing is like mind blowing. Like I've had people that are running really big companies that have no idea like what to do with this. And it's not their fault because things are happening so fast. If you're doing really well, it's very easy to get like left behind on this.
But we've seen this before. Like I'm just thinking now of when like programmatic became a thing. And suddenly you had to have specialized media buyers, and then Meta continued to change. And as I was saying, the complexity in my business, and I didn't account for how much you have to understand about a very specific channel to be able to squeeze every drop out of it. And so if we think about how IT was introduced into companies, and then marketing, and then social departments, and now there's all kinds of different titles for all kinds of different people because businesses just become so complex and competitive. So I have to imagine if we were to approach AI from an operations, an efficiency, a process point of view, it simply is just a new tool, but we go about it the same way we go about any kind of business improvement now.
It is a tool. I think it's the reason why I think it's different in my opinion, right, is because it's happened faster than anything we've ever had in our lifetime. And it's going to get to the point in a few years where it's the only tool we've ever created that's smarter than us. And like, that's hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. And I mean, even stomach. I mean, it's hard for me. Here's like my AI origin story, if you will, right? I'm why I'm like, I got to change everything that I'm doing. What you were saying about like looking at and understanding like how people work. And like one of the things that I did was I'm like, all right, when it first came out, I had a founder on my podcast called The Scale Up Show. He was $50 million company. His a guy named Chris Savage from Wistia. And he's like, hey, Ryan, have you heard of Dolly before? And I'm like, no, I haven't. Cause this was in like 22, like October of 22. Tried it out with my daughter at home. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. It was like B1, right? So it kind of sucked. So then used it, but then I got on the early list for ChatGPT. And then the first thing they did when it came out is like, oh, is this going to replace this or not? So I'm like, all right, I'm going to test it on something that I know to be true, that I spent like 10,000 hours, right? I use the 10,000 hour rule. 10,000 hours that I did in customer meetings and understanding how they're compensated, evaluated, how they emotionally feel. The thing that scared the living bejesus out of me is literally after 2 minutes and 2 or 3 questions, they got like 90% of the way there. Right. And so I'm like, okay, this is why it's different, you know? And that was a general use tool. That wasn't even specific. That was me just asking questions.
2022? Is that when this happened?
Yeah, it was like right when ChatGPT came out, and like I think it was like November of 22, October, late October, early November. You know what
scared the shit out of me? In 2016, I think it was 2015 or 16, someone released a product called The Grid.
Okay.
Which was the idea, and then they released Grid 2, and I don't know if it ever went anywhere. But the idea was that it was a no-code website builder.
Okay.
That was 100% AI driven. And all you would do is upload like some photos, some colors, some simple font or some messaging prompts, and it would build out the entire website automatically. Based on conversion paths and kind of endpoints you set, it continually split tested in real time, different messaging, different layouts, different everything. And it hit me where I was like, because you know, I'm running a creative production agency, a marketing agency where we get paid to make stuff for people. And I'm looking at that happen, and I'm looking at Facebook announced that, you know, you can just upload assets and it'll make its own ads for you. You can go to Google with responsive display and it, you know, you upload 15 different combinations and it'll pick the best combinations. And I'm looking at my team of people, my profit center people, and I'm looking at them and I'm going, I feel like we're only a few years away from all of you not having jobs anymore. And I said to them, like, listen, like, you got to be careful because right now our entire livelihood is based off of making things for people. And I think there'll come a time in the near future where machines will do this much better than us. You know, if the data is there and if the direction is there and if the prompts are there. And so that's really what started to change our entire journey. But I'm not afraid of it anymore, only because I think people who are behind, outdated, conservative, safe approaches and stuck in the past will do very poorly over the next few years with the transition. But if you're continually looking to see how can I add value today and how can I drive results today with the tools that are available to me today, then I think you'll be okay because everyone else will be freaking out as the world burns around them and you'll just be focused on driving value, driving results and figuring out what works right now. That's I haven't ever shared that with anyone. But that's what I'm putting my faith and trust and optimism in.
Yeah, I think that's smart, man. It's like you can't get too stuck in the future or you'll lose the present, right? And so I think there's a healthy balance of like focusing on, you know, the value creation in real time and then stacking on top of that, like everything that's coming at you. But focus, like you said, focus is superpower, focusing on like how that relates to your specific core value creation and then kind of look at it through that lens. Because if you try and ingest every freaking tool of 15,000 tools and steps and models and everything, like it's just too much for anybody to handle.
So how much of this do you think we should just ignore? That's what I keep wondering. Like, you know, you can't get stuck in the future. And part of me is like, if our time and our creative energy is a finite resource that I only have so much today and only so much tomorrow, part of me just wants to put my head in my sand and then figure out kind of when everybody's fought about everything, figure out the winning team and just jump on it. Yeah.
Here's what I would say, man. Like if you look at the large language models, so that's like ChatGPT, Claude, and Microsoft has Copilot. There's one other that's Anthropic. So here's what I would say. As long as you pick one of those, you're going to be fine, right? Because if you learn how to use one of them, it translates to the others. And there's only, what's happened is that there used to be big differences. They're all starting to kind of catch up with each other a little bit. Now I know ChatGPT is going to have Sora, which is released, which is text to video generation, which I think is going to be pretty game changing in a lot of ways. But we'll see what happens, right? You never know from the demo videos to what actually translates. So I think as long as you learn one of them and understand the core concepts and then focus it on, like you're saying, what's the value I could create now with this tool, and then keep iterating on top of it, you're going to be okay, right? That's the focus. If as long as it's attached to like tangible outcomes and business values, then I think you'll be good.
So I like to end my conversations this way, and I would love to hear from you what your number one tip or strategy would be to help those of us listening sell more. But since we've been talking about AI and you're so into this right now, I would love it if you could tailor it around that.
Yeah. Well, how about we mix the two? How about we have those two have a baby together, right? How can you sell more with AI?
Them together.
And this will integrate with marketing and sales. And this is one of the simplest things that I think you could do is, so if you're looking at customer data, here's the multi-step process, right? But I'm getting very tactical so you can implement it. Step one is sign up for a ChatGPT Teams account. It's basically you have two people on it, or you could do a Microsoft Copilot account. I think ChatGPT Teams is probably the best. It'll cost you $50 a month, right? Just do that, even though it's you and one other user. That's step one. Step two, export the data. Now that you have the security layer wrapped around it, export the data that you have from your client list, right? In terms of your revenue and your deals won and everything like that. Enrich it through a Zoom or Apollo or something like that. So you have a full data set. Then you could leverage that file in Z format and basically say, okay, identify the top 20% of my client base that accounts for 80% of my revenue, right? Or just top 20% of clients, and create a separate ICP specifically for that segment, and then do a different one for the bottom 80%. You're going to find really weird things, but that allowed me to double our deal size every year without doing anything else besides focusing on the right targets. So that's a really simple thing that you could do. And you could do that in like 15 minutes. After you've exported the data, it might take maybe a half hour, but that could literally change your entire year if you do that.
That is such amazing advice. I'm working through the book right now, How I Raised Myself from Failing to Success in Selling, which is, okay. I don't know when the book was written, maybe in the 50s. I don't know. The guy was a baseball player in 1910.
Love that.
He met he joined a Dale Carnegie course. So this is an old book, but it's funny because chapter 2, where he's talking about how he was able to I think 30 times, so increase his conversion rate 30 times over. It literally came from what you're suggesting way back then, which was track everything, pull the data, look at the data, and then figure out where you should be spending your time and how you should be customizing your approach, depending if it's the top 20% or lower people. So I love that we just had a conversation around AI and tech and what's happening this year, and yet what you're suggesting has not changed in 100 years.
It's just a faster way to do it. I used to do it manually, and it would take 6 hours, 8 hours, and because it took that long, a lot of companies don't do it. Now you can do it in a half hour, right? That's where this becomes beautiful, I think.
I love it. I love it. Ryan, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Hey there, it's Mark again. If you really loved the talk that I just had with Ryan, I want to point out one quick thing, that my strategic branding agency, Sales Loop, helps B2B business owners develop sound strategies and action plans to meet sales, marketing, messaging, differentiation, branding, to hit all of these challenges head on. Now, we are not going to be your AI experts because I don't think most people are right now with where AI is. But if you're interested in attracting and closing more high-value clients, if you want to stay top of mind with your current and past clients, if you want to become the credible market leader in your industry, then I'd really recommend you head over to LinkedIn, send me a message, and let's set up a call. My contact details are in the show notes. Now, before we wrap up, I want to get into the 3 biggest takeaways from this talk. Number 1, we are at a really important time of change in marketing, in sales, in business. and our ability to be able to stay on top of what's happening with new technologies like AI. Not so that way we are the experts at it, but that way we can at least stay dangerous and pivot to the changes that are happening very, very quickly right now. This is crucial for maintaining and accelerating our growth. Just think, if we are doing this and most people are not, that gives us a competitive advantage. If other people are doing it and you are not, you are now at a disadvantage. So it's not about being perfect. It's not even really about knowing what the right answer is today, but it is about just actively staying on top of it so we can respond as quickly as possible to the changing market demands. Number 2, AI can 100% be integrated into your existing business processes. It can help you enhance productivity, effectiveness. It can help automate and systematize key parts of your process, your operations, your delivery. All of your SOPs can very easily be created, but it doesn't mean that they're going to work for people. It's about people and process. And so the process certainly can be helped with AI. People can be helped with AI. But where I'm going with this is we have to be able to look at our businesses holistically and look for the opportunities to allow for AI to make processes better and make people more efficient. This will not happen without us looking at our businesses and actually doing the work of implementation and staying on top of it. And this brings me to key lesson number 3. You and your leadership team must play a role in this adaptation. So it's critical for senior executives and leaders to understand the potential and practical uses of the different emerging technologies like AI. It's time for us to go to school. It's time for us to stay on top of this. It's time for us to play around. It's time for us to get back to that startup mode. Remember that feeling? Figuring things out, making mistakes, working through things. Now, you may be very deep into your business. You may be at a very mature level. You may be at a scale up. You may be somewhat hands-off on your business. You may be very, very good at systematizing and building SOPs and people and processes and operations around this. So if that's the case, then you have the experience. And if this isn't the case, now is the time to start learning these systems, learning these processes to make your business better. So there you have it. Those were my 3 biggest takeaways from this talk, but I am curious, what were yours? Did anything challenge your thinking or your perspective? If so, let's dive deeper into this over on LinkedIn. That's where I share most of my insights, and I like to spark conversations over there. I am Mark Drager. You can find my contact details in the episode show notes. Go ahead and give me a connection and drop me a DM and let's talk. Now, while you're over on LinkedIn, be sure to follow Ryan Staley for more innovative strategies and focus on AI and what's happening. You can also check out his website, ryanstaley.io. You can check out his podcast as well, The Scale Up Show with Ryan Staley. And one last thing, if you've made it this far into the episode, if you're still listening to my voice, hey there, how you doing? But if you are, I think you should really subscribe to this podcast. And you might wonder why. Well, you're obviously an ambitious B2B leader. You're obviously looking to grow sales within your organization, and you're obviously looking for help. And that's why we're here. Or maybe, you're one of those conspiracy theorists convinced that this podcast is secretly sending out subliminal messaging to boost sales. The whole Paul is dead thing? Maybe that's happening right now. Anyway, either way, I am Mark Drager, and I will catch you in the next episode.